Welcome to the local campaign. Thank you for joining us for our debate in the riding of Carleton. In just a moment, I will introduce the 5 candidates who are here to debate the issues. But first, I'll explain how the debate is going to work. Each candidate will have a 1-minute opening statement. The order for those opening statements was drawn at random just a few minutes ago. Then we'll move into a series of debates about the important topics in Carleton and across the country in this 2019 federal election campaign. To start off each topic, I'll direct a question at one of the candidates. That candidate will have 45 seconds to respond to the question on his own, after which we will open it up to debate from among all the candidates for several minutes on that topic. At the end of that debate, we'll go back to the candidate to whom the question was directed, and he will have 30 seconds to wrap up on that subject. We'll move through a number of different topics that way, with every candidate getting a chance to answer at least one question. And then we'll have closing statements, once again, of 1 minute in length, and we'll do those in the reverse order of the opening statements. So let's meet the candidates who are seeking your vote on October the 21st in Carleton. First is the Liberal candidate, Chris Rogers. The Conservative Party candidate is Pierre Poilievre. Representing the NDP, Kevin Hua. The Green Party candidate is Gordon Kubanek. And representing the People's Party of Canada, Alain Moussende. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for being here for the debate. We're going to begin with the opening statements now, and we'll start with Liberal Party candidate Chris Rogers. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Well, my name is Chris Rogers. I live in Metcalfe with my wife Jenny and our son Cameron. I've been a teacher in the area at Osgood Township High School and South Carleton High School. I've also worked as a federal public servant. My focus in this election is local quality of life. We need a local MP that will fight for things like local infrastructure projects, such as the light rail in Stittsville, better internet in the rural areas, and of course a sportsplex and swimming pool in an area close to Riverside South. When I was a kid, the things that were really important to me, of course, affordability and the environment. These were the things that were crucial, and the people I looked up to, my teachers, my bosses, community organizers, they were the folks that went to bat to fight for those sorts of things. Those are the things that I'm going to fight for as your MP, bringing honest leadership that will work for you in Carleton.
All right, thank you. Next up is the Conservative candidate, Pierre Poilievre.
Thank you. It's time for you to get ahead. Right now, that's not happening. Prices are rising faster than paychecks and pensions. High Liberal taxes are driving up the cost of living. The carbon tax has increased not only your gas and heating bill, but also indirectly increased costs like groceries. It's time for a government that lives within its means, leaves more in your pocket, and lets you get ahead. Conservatives have a plan to make that happen. We'll end aid to corrupt foreign governments and affluent countries to save 25% of our foreign aid budget. We'll cut corporate welfare to save $1.5 billion. And we'll slow the growth of government spending to phase out the deficit and lower your taxes. That will allow us to lower income taxes, bring back the children's fitness tax credit, the transit tax credit, take GST off your home heat. All of these measures designed to leave more in your pocket and let you get ahead, because it is time for you to get ahead.
All right, thank you. Next up is the New Democratic Party candidate, Kevin Hua. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to thank Rogers TV for conducting this debate. My name is Kevin Hua. I'm your NDP candidate in the riding of Carleton this federal election. I'm an 18-year-old, so I'm one of the youngest candidates in this election. So I'm a Carleton student studying my Bachelor of Public Affairs and Policy Management. I volunteered with Around the Campfire, an organization that's worked with kids with autism, as well as I work now with the Ottawa Catholic School Board's International and Indigenous Language Program. In this election, the 2 key issues that I'm presenting to this riding are on climate change, where, my generation's future is at stake and the current government is not doing enough to address it, and the issue of your cost of living, to bring down your expenses, be it through pharmacare, which would cover, which many Canadians are currently struggling with, as well as eliminating the interest rate on student loans and bringing $10 billion of investment into childcare. I hope that I can present a bold, progressive plan to you today.
Okay, thank you. Next up is the Green Party candidate, Gordon Kubanek.
Hi there. I'm an engineer, physics teacher, and 5-time Green Party candidate. When I was a consultant at the Department of National Defense, the colonel I worked with told me the following: the definition of insanity is to keep on doing the same thing and expect a different result. Well, we've had 152 years of liberal conservative rules, and they're still stuck in the same old pattern. Luckily for you, the Green Party is there to have a real option. The signals that business as usual is no longer working are clear: unaffordable housing, traffic jams that never end, but especially the opioid and mental health epidemic running rampant among our youth. Anxiety, depression, and eco-anxiety affect now 7 out of our 10 youth, and we need to listen to their cries for help. 1 million of them were marching this month to demand that we address the climate crisis. The status quo is over, and that is why across Canada, voters are looking at the Greens seriously for the first time, and I hope you do too. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Finally, the opening statement from the People's Party of Canada candidate Alain Moussende. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm Dr. Alain Moussende. I'm part-time professor at the University of Ottawa in biopharmaceutical sciences and full-time employee with the federal government. Many experts have said that this election is about nothing, like the Seinfeld TV series. And that's because many Canadians believe that the 4 old parties lack the vision and courage to present bold policies that are required to improve the fiscal health of our country. The People's Party of Canada has such bold policies. For example, balancing the budget within 2 years, abolishing corporate welfare and the supply management cartel, reinstating Pension Act for our veterans, and many more. Our core principle is to govern on behalf of all Canadians, putting Canada first and not pandering to special interest groups. Thank you.
All right, thank you to the candidates for your opening statements. We're going to move now to a series of debates about the important topics in this federal election. I'll start with a question to Liberal candidate Chris Rogers. After broken promises on issues like electoral reform and balanced budgets and budget deficits, and after he was twice found to have violated conflict of interest rules, how can Canadians still trust Justin Trudeau?
In this election, voters will have a choice. They have seen 4 years of bold action by this government. We have reduced taxes for the middle class, we have made life more affordable, and we have put a national price on pollution. The best way to determine and understand what this government would do under the leadership of Mr. Trudeau is to look at what Mr. Trudeau has done over the last 4 years. We are going to continue working for the middle class. We are going to continue making life more affordable for Canadians. And we are going to continue to take solid action on climate change and protecting the environment.
Okay, it's open to everyone now on the subject of trust and accountability.
Well, you didn't even begin to answer the question. The question was about Trudeau being found guilty twice of breaking the ethics law, about his and your broken promise from the last election that you would balance the budget this year. We now have a $20 billion deficit. About his and your broken promise to change the electoral system and to end omnibus budgets, which you did not do. So you've broken all of these promises
for the last 4 years.
Yeah,
Mr.
yes, I know you've been promised, but you stood before us 4 years ago. You said these things would happen. They did not happen, and it is amazing. You're right, you weren't in Parliament, but you broke all of these promises. Your government broke all the promises that you made to the people of Carleton. You have broken more promises out of Parliament than most people do in a lifetime in the House of Commons.
That's a catchy tagline,
true.
but no one takes it seriously.
Well, it's true.
Canadians know.
No one takes you seriously.
Canadians know that they have a choice. If they want a balanced budget by cuts and austerity, which the Harper years brought, as well as the Doug Ford government is bringing in.
You promised a balanced budget.
Canadians
it was
know.
You who promised
Canadians
a balanced
know
budget.
that we want.
Do you regret making that promise?
We want a balanced budget by growing the economy.
Well, you do want
investing
a
in
balanced budget
people, and by investing in the economy and infrastructure.
So
that's what Canadians
now
want.
He wants a balanced budget. Now he claims that he wants a balanced budget. Just the other day, Justin Trudeau said we never need to balance the budget. He's promising $57 billion of new spending, and that does not include numerous expensive promises like pharmacare.
Canadians know what our platform is because we've released a platform. We don't know what your platform is.
Let's let some of the other candidates.
We don't know what your platform is.
here.
This is out of the Doug Ford playbook. You don't say anything And then once you win the election,
Let's let some of
we
the
know
other
what the cuts will
candidates,
be.
have a turn here.
Well,
Go ahead.
I want to go back to the broken promises, specifically on electoral reform, because, I mean, in 2015, the Liberals were handed one of these big majorities. They took voters for granted, especially among my generation, on these promises like electoral reform. And guess what? They let us down on this. And that's absolutely ridiculous in that sense. They promised to bring us electoral reform. They didn't. They took my generation for granted. I will not tolerate that. You know, we have to stand up on this fact.
Canadians know that we need to protect the integrity of the system, and you need a consensus to change.
By breaking the law.
You need a
Mr. Rogers, there is
consensus to change
consensus among Canadians.
the voting system.
By breaking the law.
The
is what
lowest
you did.
consensus is an Angus Reid poll, which stated 70% of Canadians want electoral reform. It is absolutely ridiculous that 39% of the vote gives you 100% of control in Parliament.
Absolutely.
We are the only OECD nation with this broken, or with the United States and the United Kingdom with this broken system. Every other nation has some form of proportional representation to respect how democracy should be working based on every single vote counting.
Right. Well done, Kevin. You said it right. Unfortunately, what we've seen from our conservative liberal friends is they keep on slowing mud at each other. Kevin's done a great job of being positive. The Greens want to be positive too. I think that Trudeau has got in this pickle because he's tried to appease to everybody. He's tried to appease Alberta one day, but he also tries to appease environmentalists like the Green Party supporters. And he got our vote last election. I don't think he's going to get it now. He's tried to have his cake and eat it. You declare a climate emergency one day, he buys a pipeline the next day. That's what Trudeau's been doing across the country. And he's done it, but it's not working for him. He's tried to deal with everybody. It's like he doesn't have a core value. What do I actually believe in? It seems to be which way are the winds blowing.
He believes in
It's a
balance.
very hard
The Liberal
job
Party
to
believes
do,
in balance.
but if you
Canadians
want real
expect
action,
us,
we'll do it.
with
Okay,
respect, Gord,
actually do it.
Canadians expect their government to take a balanced approach, which is exactly what we're doing on fighting climate change and also on ensuring economic prosperity by buying a pipeline.
So buying a pipeline is prosperity. You've taken 4 point. If I could
do you
finish,
not believe that the oil industry is important? This is a revelation.
Of course I do, and that's why I believe in building pipelines, not buying pipelines. That's the difference.
The pipeline
Mr.
is
Rogers.
being built right
Well,
now.
The
I
pipeline
need
is.
to,
Excuse me,
I need
if I could
to-
just finish on that. The reality is there's not one single solitary inch of new pipeline
That's
that
not
has been
true.
built.
The pipeline
you have
is being
spent
built right now.
$4.5 billion on a $2 billion pipeline. What remind me not to take any advice from you on buying real estate. That was
Pipeline
not
is being
an
built right
investment.
now.
I want to make
That
sure
was a
Alain
massive
Musende
loss
has a
of
chance
money.
to
Yeah,
speak.
We will
So
build rather than buy
excuse me,
pipelines.
thank you. Alain Musende, your turn.
Well, it is striking. The problem is not just that the Liberal government broke the promise of balancing the budget. It's that at this very point, they have absolutely no idea when they can possibly balance the budget, even if we had to forgive them for breaking that promise. We know the Conservatives are going to balance the budget, they said, in 5 years. The People's Party intends to do that in 2 years. But it seems like the Liberals, Green and NDP, have absolutely no idea. And the magnitude of the problem, when you consider that the country is paying $26 billion a year on interest to the loan. How many generations is it going to take for Canadians to start paying and dealing with that issue?
The reality is that given what the scientists are telling us about climate change, we are going to have no choice but to phase out the tar sands in this century. The big investors and the big oil companies are already leaving Alberta because it's too expensive and they don't want to be stuck with the liability. The amount of, right now, I talked yesterday for an hour with a citizen who lived at Fort McMurray and has a business there, and it's really tough in Alberta. 1/3 of the office towers in Calgary are empty. They need our help, but they need help to transition to the economy that is coming because the age of oil is over. The age of expensive oil is over. But we need to work together and not be divisive and not sling mud at each other, but work together.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll go back to Chris Rogers now. You have the final 30 seconds on this topic.
Canadians expect fiscal management and the environment and our social fabric to be addressed in balance. We are growing the economy. We are investing in people and infrastructure. We have the best debt to GDP situation in the entire G7. Unemployment is at an all-time low. Poverty is at an all-time low. We are making the right choices. We have seen what happens in the playbook from the Scheer Ford coalition. You don't say anything. After the election, you make cuts. We are rejecting that. We're going to keep investing in Canadians and in communities.
Thank you. We'll move to the next question now for Conservative candidate Pierre Poilievre. We've heard a lot of talk about values so far during this election campaign and about social issues like same-sex marriage and abortion rights. Where do you personally stand on women's rights and LGBTQ rights, and how far do you believe the government should go to protecting those rights?
So the Conservative Party has made it clear that in government there will be no legislation introduced on either same-sex marriage or abortion. Both are legal now, and both will remain legal after the election is over, regardless of who wins it. So Justin Trudeau wants to distract from his failures, his law-breaking, his deficits, and his broken promises by hurling false and inaccurate allegations at Conservatives and distracting from his own record. Our position on this is clear. We are not going to reopen the debate on either same-sex marriage or on abortion. And we are going to move forward on the priorities of Canadians, which is to make life affordable so everyday Canadians can get ahead.
Okay, it's open to everyone now on this topic.
If I actually could make an observation, Mr. Poilievre, you just accused or pointed at Mr. Rogers for not answering the question. You have not answered the question either. The question was, how do you personally stand on LGBTQ rights and abortion? You did not answer that question, and I'm going to be blunt, you're being a hypocrite in that sense. I mean, we've seen with, what was it, in Burnaby Seymour, the Conservative candidate Heather Lung had to be thrown out for her homophobic comments and saying that the LGBTQ community is apparently trying to recruit children. And frankly, that is simply insulting, and it should not be the attitude a government has towards such a vulnerable community.
I think that's a great thing to say. Well done, Kevin. The Green Party is way ahead of the pack with this. For us, all Canadians are equal citizens. As the old Pierre Trudeau said in the past, what you do in your bedroom is your own private business. We are very, very inclusive, but I think there's bigger issues right now than this for us, because that's a motherhood statement to be all inclusive and have women's rights to choose for their body. But for us, things like Aboriginal rights and making sure that immigrant certification, there's a lot of inclusive. It's all about being inclusive, and right now the Aboriginal nations are suffering. For me, my personal focus is a nation called Grassy Narrows north of Dryden. I worked in the pulp and paper industry, where in the past they used to use mercury. There's mercury poisoning there of 90% of the inhabitants of Grassy Narrows, and successive Liberal and Conservative governments, both at the provincial and federal level, have washed their hands of it. It's a disaster. They've been asking again and again. The Liberals have promised to do something but done nothing. So it goes way beyond just boiling water and housing. Mercury poisoning isn't that. When I went door to door and met with new immigrants, their big thing is we came to Canada with big promises. We came to the land of hope and glory, but my certification is accepted. You know, I am a doctor, I'm an engineer, my certification is work. I can't work. And the reasons I came to Canada, I feel betrayed.
I think those are very important topics, but I also would like to hear Mr. Poilievre's view. Because many of the Conservative candidates are saying they personally they do not support a woman's right to choose. If legislation was presented in the House, how would you vote? Would you vote to protect a woman's right to choose, or would you vote to take away a woman's right to choose?
I would not support any legislation on this issue.
You would vote no?
I would vote against any attempt to reopen this debate.
Would you vote against legislation if it was presented in the House?
Yes.
Okay. Be interested if a campaign coalition for life to know that.
Well, the reality is the Conservative Party is not going to reopen the abortion debate, period. We've made that clear. And frankly, your party is hypocritical on this, because Justin Trudeau said that he does not support abortion. He believes it should be legal, but that he does personally not support it. And then he attacks Andrew Scheer for holding exactly the same position.
It is not the same view.
It is actually the same view.
Mr. Trudeau's actions and Mr. Trudeau's words are consistently protecting a fundamental right of women to choose and have domain over their own bodies.
Your leaders'
one at a time, please. One at a time.
Your leaders' actions on women's rights are appalling. He threw 2 senior cabinet ministers under the bus, females, because they dared speak up against his corruption. A 3rd MP from Montreal, a female minority, was kicked out of your party because she refused to go out and promote Justin Trudeau's phony feminist credentials.
Mr. Poilievre,
you are not
You would like to
are
talk
not
about
as
Justin Trudeau.
advertised. You are not as advertised, Mr. Rogers. You, like him, have a phony agenda on this issue in order to distract from the real issues.
Mr. Polliver, you would like to talk about Justin Trudeau because you would not like.
You don't want to talk
you
about
would
him
not
because
like
he's been such a
people.
disaster.
One at a time.
You would
It's
not
Chris
like
Rogers'
people
turn
to
now,
know
please.
your 15 years of
Okay,
inaction in
excuse
Carleton
me, one at
and
a
the
time,
fact
please.
that you voted against the strategy for gender-based violence inexplicably. You voted against that. I'm not sure why. I'm not sure how anyone could see that protecting women from gender-based violence is not a valid
It's too bad that we're
motion to
stuck
vote
in
for.
this
A valid.
argument. But once again, the main parties are stuck in accusing each other rather than putting forth positive issues. My personal mission on this campaign is to bring forward that mental health is a much bigger issue than we can possibly imagine. It's very clear in the LGBT community, the suicide rates, the rates of anxiety and depression are very, very high, much higher than average, because they feel judged, they feel threatened. They don't feel welcome. Our job as Canadians is to welcome everybody and not to judge anybody who are contributing members of society. So what we're talking about is more than that.
I have not placed the
Let's go on that mental
word,
health.
if you can
Time
let
for a
me
chat.
speak first. Yeah.
You go.
Because the People's Party of Canada is a new party, and it is important for Canadians to know what we stand for. The 4 pillars of our party rests on individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. So by individual freedoms, so related to that issue, that includes freedom to choose, freedom of conscience, and etc. So in that particular issue, like Mr. Poilievre, the Honorable Poilievre said, the Liberal government under Mr. Trudeau have no credibility. When you cannot respect the freedom of women, eminent women like Ms. Philpott and the others, there is absolutely no way that you can respect the freedom of choice of other women. It's irreconcilable.
What we've got here is a social contract, and what we've been doing over time in Canada very, very well, I want to say something positive here, we've been expanding the bubble of who we include and who is in and out. So I think let's focus on the good news story that we are a tolerant society, and it's actually getting better. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Let's go back to Pierre Poilievre. I asked you the question, so you get the final 30 seconds on this topic.
Yes, as has been clear from the beginning of this debate, Justin Trudeau has been attempting to distract from his record of broken promises, law-breaking, deficits, and tax increases on the middle class by trying to raise hot-button and distracting issues. This election is about who do you trust to make life more affordable so that you get ahead. You're paying higher taxes, your consumer prices are higher. We are the only party that has a plan for government to live within its means, leave more in your pocket, and let you get ahead.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to the next question now, which I'll direct to NDP candidate Kevin Hua. You brought up climate change as one of the top priorities in this election. How will your climate change plan protect both the environment and the economy?
Right, so one of the important things I find with the NDP climate plan is that it's not only to be an economy that's sustainable for the environment, but also sustainable for workers. So we intend to create 300,000 new clean energy jobs in the process of transitioning workers to help them move from the fossil fuel industry into the green energy industry. Over a 7-year period between 2010 and 2017, the green economy grew by 4.8 percentage points, while the general economy grew by 3.6 percentage points. So there is an opportunity for economic growth within that sector of the economy, and we need to take the steps forward. This includes creating a climate bank to help with these infrastructure spending projects, as well as essentially having the commitment to fight climate change for my generation and future generations.
Okay.
What's great about this election What's great this election about the Green Party is finally issues that are near and dear to our hearts are front and center. If we have a plan, and not only that, I've worked with an organization called the Club of Rome to go into the details of how to transition. A lot of people focus on the short-term costs. Before I did this, because I know Pierre very well, and he's a forthright, honest gentleman who wants to make sure you are credible. My neighbors want to make sure I'm credible. I live net zero carbon. After the initial investments, my cost of living is actually less. What we need to do is help the country transition. The transition is going to happen. Prices are less. Singapore, A place that I visited, which is a very capitalist country, is investing $10 billion in a solar project in Australia because it's cheaper to bring power that way than to bring in oil into the countries. In the long term, after the investments are paying up, this is a net saver. The longer we wait, the more that means we're going to be buying technologies and know-how for other countries. Change is coming, resistance is futile. The costs are there to benefit us. The Green Party proposes making building codes net zero code, banning, like they're doing in Europe, the sale of gasoline cars after 20 and 30. I have an electric car. It's way cheaper to operate. So this is a good news story. This is not a threat to the industry. The big thing, though, is we need to have Alberta. As I said, I was on the phone yesterday for over an hour with somebody in Fort Mac. We need to help in the transition. Alberta has one big advantage. They got the biggest source of geothermal heating and electricity in the country. So it's about the transition. It pays, it works, the technology is there. Tesla and other leaders are out there with the batteries. There are microfit programs. There are so many great news. You know, I'm an engineer, I read the science. The technology is all there. It's all about having the courage, and we're going to have the courage to that. I'd like to leave the floor to somebody else to really act. Thank you.
We're the only party that proposes technology rather than taxes as the solution to our environmental problems. Let's start with the issue of climate change. Conservatives propose that large industrial corporations who fail to reduce their greenhouse gases be required to invest in green technology. So that is to say that we would set a cap on emissions by large industrial emitters. Those who exceed that cap would have to set some specifically in green technologies that will allow them to bring their emissions down. That will create competition between large industrial corporations to lower their emissions because they would have a massive financial incentive to do so. And if they fail to, instead of paying a tax to the government for politicians to spend, they would pay the money into green technology that actually solves the problem. We will reinstate the transit tax credit, which Justin Trudeau took away, and bring in a green home tax credit, a simple, easy-to-use credit that will allow you to save 20% on green improvements to your appliances or your renovations. I was proud also to secure a third of the funding for the Ottawa River Action Plan to stop the disgusting practice of pouring raw sewage into our waters. Now we need to do the same nationwide. One of Justin Trudeau's very first acts was to allow the City of Montreal to dump over 1 billion liters of raw, untreated sewage directly into the St. Lawrence. That is disgusting. It messes up the ecosystems, and we need to work with the provinces and municipalities to put a permanent end to raw sewage dumps in our waterways.
And
we're the only
question is, why wasn't that done for the 10 years? The 10 years that you were in power.
I got money when I was in power.
Why did you not end that practice? You sat at it didn't happen.
It did happen. I got the money.
Mr. Pollard, that is false. That is false.
Your party opposed it.
That is false, Mr. Pollard.
I got a third of the funds for the Ottawa River Action
That is
Plan.
why we're investing in.
You asked me a question. Are you going to let me answer that question?
You did answer, and the answer is false.
The answer is accurate. I got a third of the funding for the Ottawa River Action Plan.
This is a distraction from the fact that your party has no national plan.
Well, I really would like more than one person talking at a time. So, Chris Rogers, go ahead.
This is a distraction from the fact that your party has no plan to address climate change on a national level. And your attacks on the carbon rebate program, I am sure, make Brian Mulroney give him a broken heart every time you speak about that. He was a conservative, a true conservative, who was actually concerned about the environment. He used pricing. He used pricing to end acid rain. The truth is, the Liberal Party has brought in a national price on pollution that is working. It has been shown to work, to grow the economy, to be flexible, to allow companies and individuals to make the changes in this transition that they need. We have also committed to helping individual workers by through a transition fund to help them transition when their companies close down. On the individual level, we are allowing $40,000 in loans to help individuals. We have a plan.
80%. One at a time, please. One at a time, please.
I would like to make a point. I would address two things here. First, I would like to help the Greens and NDP to understand that their dreams of today is the reality of Germany today. So you do not have to need to reinvent the wheel. So 2 points. In terms of the transition, first, Germany was the poster child in 2015 when it comes to transitioning to green technology. Their investment went from $44 billion to now 14. And as we speak, Germans paid one of the highest costs of electricity in Europe, and they are hurting in winter. And as we speak, Germany now is about to cut a forest to access coal. While the Green and EBN telling us here, we have to stop the terrorist. I have to finish. And second,
no, you don't
the
have to
question,
finish.
yes,
You're
the
comparing
question.
two countries
No,
that are not the
no,
same.
it is exactly.
We have
are
resources
all under
which
OECD.
they don't have.
Let me finish,
My
Mr.
family,
Kubane.
they have
so
no
you
resources.
had your moment. Let me finish.
We have the resources. We have the ability.
Kevin said that. we're gonna
That's
fight
time.
climate change.
Thank you.
How?
That's time. I asked the quick question to Kevin Waugh. We'll go back to you for the final 30 seconds.
So we've seen a couple of different plans, but all of them practically fall short. The Liberals, they've bought a pipeline, and their carbon tax exempts the oil and gas industry on 80% of their emissions. The Conservative plan, frankly, they want to gamble on the future. They want to gamble on my future. And economists and environmentalists have all said it will cost more and it will bring us further from our targets. The NDP has brought a bold plan to actually fight climate change. That means removing the exemptions on the carbon tax, and that means helping Canadians transition into a net zero carbon economy.
Okay, thank you. Gordon Kubanek, I'll direct the next question to you, the Green Party candidate. The federal government has a big role to play in the growth and design of the nation's capital. What specifically would you change about the National Capital Commission?
This is something that I'm not an expert in. I've lived here for 20 plus years. For me, as a Green Party, the key thing is collaboration and not being sort of fighting against each other. One of the things that was proposed years ago was to work with the NCC in a way that we don't have this divide between Gatineau and Ottawa. For me, I have a cottage in Quebec, and getting through the city is a mess. I think the fact that we treat the cities completely separately and we don't have a transportation corridor is a travesty. And so we need to integrate better. I think that the green belt was hopped, and perhaps it might be an idea to make another green belt and then do development and intensify. So the NCC can help in that.
That's time. It's open to everyone now on this topic.
Well, the Liberals have forgotten about Ottawa. They elected 7 Liberal MPs in the area, and they've done absolutely nothing for the city. Let me start with the Civic Hospital. First of all, the Liberals put a Montreal MP in charge of the NCC, and they put the NCC in charge of the location of the future Civic Hospital. What did the NCC recommend? Putting the hospital at Tunney's pasture, which would have required knocking down federal buildings and making the hospital inaccessible to ambulances and patients alike. Everyone in the city was against the idea, especially the hospital board. Everyone except the 7 Liberal MPs who sat there and did absolutely nothing. An eighth would have done even less. I was the only MP in all of the city who stood up and fought back through a campaign at a community, citywide, and parliamentary level
What
to
about
help to
fighting for
overturn.
Carleton?
Well, actually, people in Carleton use the Civic Hospital, Mr. Rogers. My daughter was born there. It is actually a Carleton issue.
What about projects in Carleton?
Not important to the people
We've heard
of
this.
Ottawa.
One at a time.
Then you frankly don't understand the health care of this city. What about Carleton? Yes, I secured a third of the funding for the Strandherd-Armstrong Bridge.
That was in the plans for
I
decades.
secured a third of the funding for Phase 2 of LRT. I secured a third of the funding for the Ottawa River Action Plan. People in Ottawa care about our Ottawa River. Those are all Carleton issues. You asked what about Carleton? I've delivered for Carleton.
I don't think so. I think you'd like to distract away from Carleton. We need someone talking about the future. We've heard you rehash these old battles many, many times. The reality is, people want, in Riverside South and Findlay Creek, they want an MP who's going to fight for a pool, a library, social infrastructure, the things that they need in their communities. People in Greeley and in Metcalfe, the small businesses and the folks working at home, they want an MP. They want an MP, again, distraction. They want an MP who will improve their access to affordable high-speed internet. We need someone to fight for and have a vision and fight for the light rail in Stittsville. That's exactly. We've invested $500 million in new satellite technology.
Not actually fighting against
Canadians,
the telecommunications.
people in Carleton.
Okay, again, one at a time, please. One at a time.
I mean, I'm sorry, what Trudeau said when he wanted to help decrease telecommunications costs is by simply talking to the telecommunications lobbyists, just like how he talked to the pharmaceutical lobbyists when in regards to our prescription medications. These two parties have always been in the pockets of the big corporations and the wealthy Canadians. They've helped them evade their taxes. The CRA is now in its weakest form. It's incapable of fighting against these powerful, wealthy corporations, wealthy Canadians, so they can just run away with their money. $51 billion has been taken out of your pockets that could have gone to healthcare, education, or transit. So frankly, we need a government that will actually stand up and fight against these interests, to fight it for the people in this case.
I think that we have to refocus. The question was about the NCC, not just Carleton and limited there. So when you look at the NCC's role and the city of Ottawa in general and all the suburb, there are two things that comes to mind. Fundamentally, of course, the People's Party of Canada, we respect the jurisdiction. This is a municipal jurisdiction, and we will respect that. But I think we need to look into or raise or discuss with them two aspects. First, you look at the LeBreton Flats, for example. This is one of the remaining jewels of downtown Ottawa. But the indecisiveness in terms of deciding the future of that place is alarming and concerning. And someone raised here the Ottawa River. So when you look at the Ottawa River, there are cities that we can inspire us. As I said here many times, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. You look at Amsterdam, how they have capitalized their bodies of waters that go through the city. We can make the Ottawa River much, much more attractive in terms of tourists, walk places and the likes around there. So there are things that the NCC can focus on for our beautiful city.
Now, there's a deeper fundamental issue here going on. There are structural problems in terms of the cities have no ability to tax. They're always at the behest of the provinces and the federal government. The Green Party would empower the cities and make them equal partners. We propose a meeting of Canadians which doesn't only include the provinces, it includes our Aboriginal partners and also the cities. Most people live in cities now. Imagine PEI was 50,000, has more power than Toronto, which has almost 8 million people. The cities need to be given the power to raise their own funds and not always come begging to the cities, to the federal government, to the provinces for anything else. That means public transit. That means the cities are self-defining.
I think that's it. I think that's key. That collaboration is the key.
To do what they need to do.
We need a local MP who will not.
We need to hold the NCC
who will not fight a constant war against public servants in one form or another. We need an MP who will collaborate with local authorities, who will collaborate with individuals.
The PSAC on Phoenix right now. I'm sorry.
If I could jump in on that. What Mr. Rogers is saying is that I should not have spoken up when his government attempted to move the Ottawa Civic Hospital to Tunney's Pass. I should have just shut up like the other 7 Liberal MPs who said and did nothing. I should have not have spoken up when the NCC attempted to eliminate 2 lanes on the Sir John A. Parkway. That I should just be quiet and let the Liberal establishment at the NCC do whatever they want with the lives of the people in this city.
Making a lot of noise is not the same as standing up for someone.
I did stand up and I got it done. I helped reverse that terrible decision while you sat silent, Mr. Rogers, and your 7 Liberal MPs did the same.
Having the courage to enter into a good faith debate and discussion with authorities, that's what standing up for the public is. Making a lot of noise is not that.
Okay, we'll stop there. I asked the question to Gordon Kubanek, so you get the final 30 seconds on this.
Thank you very much. I think fundamentally what we've got is we have to bridge the gap between the Quebec side and the Ontario side. We need transportation that's fast and efficient. We need integration. We not need to have us and them. It also means we got to use the crown jewel of the federal government to be a thought leader. That means in terms of how we treat our workers and not subcontracting out. That means that every building needs to be a LEED net zero building. That means transportation needs to be fast, efficient, and the go-to. And the NCC can help us do that with all our regions.
Thank you. The next question is for Alain Moussende, the People's Party of Canada candidate. All of the parties talk about affordability. It's a big theme in this campaign. Why is your plan to make life more affordable for Canadians better than the others?
Thank you. So with the People's Party of Canada, we have tangible policies that we would like to do that will deal with the affordability issues. So one of those is to reduce taxes, not only for Canadians, but also for businesses. So corporate taxes down to 10%, and then 15% exemption across the board. We don't give pocket gifts here and there in terms of taxations. Abolish the capital gains taxes so that people can use that money to invest. We want to phase out the supply management cartel, which increases the price of foods for Canadians. They pay up to $600 more than the others. We want to reduce trade barriers between the provinces as well.
It's open to everyone now on
I
this
had
topic.
a couple last night who came to me at the debate in Stittsville, and they asked, what can we do to make it affordable to retrofit our home to make it net zero carbon? I said, I've done it myself. It was really expensive. The reality is, to make it affordable for all Canadians and to work, we have to admit that over 80% of Canadians now live in the big cities, and that we have to intensify. That means changing the way we live to have cooperative housing, co-housing, intensify, costs are then cheaper, not have people live alone. 38% of the population lives alone. That's not only unaffordable, it's not good for your mental health. We have to change the transit so that public transit is everywhere. We need these big investments, not just for the environment, but also for our pocketbook, because the reality has changed. Once again, when I was a kid, there were 15 million Canadians spread all over in small towns. Now there's almost 40 million in about 12 cities. We have to make changes. We are structured for a life which is no longer affordable. We have to actually make changes to our living arrangements, our public transportation arrangements, where we get food. There is now technology, especially in Montreal, where they're growing their own food at the top of skyscrapers right downtown in Montreal. And it's affordable and it pays because the technologies now exist and you don't have the transportation costs, and it's healthier. But we need these big changes, and the Green Party is the only party, I believe, and most other voters know that we're out there, we're radical, we're going to make things happen, which after the investment are definitely going to change your pocketbook and make life affordable. But those big changes are the only way that it's really going to happen.
What we're seeing now is Kathleen Wynne's credit card campaign, where Liberals promise you tens of billions of dollars in uncosted and unbudgeted spending before the election. Put it on the national credit card and send you the bill after the election through massive tax increases when they no longer need your vote, but still need your money. That is exactly what is going to happen if Mr. Trudeau is reelected. There will be very large tax increases to pay for his unbudgeted spending. By contrast, the Conservative plan, which is costed 100% by the Parliamentary Budget Officer, and every single dollar is accounted for, we'll gently phase out the deficit over 5 years so that we don't burden our future with high interest costs, and bring in modest but realistic tax relief that will allow you to get ahead. That tax relief includes a universal tax cut that will lower taxes for every single person on their first $47,000, saving you about $850 a household. We will reinstate the tax credits for transit and children's sports that Mr. Trudeau took away. We'll bring in a green home tax credit to help you with environmentally friendly renos and appliances. And we will take GST off home heat. That is a real plan to leave more in your pocket. Governments cannot make your life more affordable by spending more of your money, because every single dollar they spend comes from you. For them to spend it, you must send it. There's no magic trick that can erase that fact.
The question
That's
is,
actually not
why
true,
is our
Mr.
plan better
Poilievre.
than other parties' plans? Our plan, the Liberal Party plan, is better for two fundamental reasons. Number one, it's focused on the middle class and low-income Canadians. Number two, it's already working. We cut taxes on the middle class. We created the Canada Child Benefit, which is a new tax-free benefit. Mr. Poilievre voted against those measures. We increased support for the lowest income seniors. Mr. Poilievre voted against that measure. Moving forward, we are going to increase the amount anyone can make from $12,000 to $15,000 before they pay any tax. This will remove 700,000 people from the tax roll entirely. We are also looking at continuing with the plan that has worked. Our focus on the middle class, investing in people, that is what allows our economy to grow. Poverty is at an all-time low in this country. Unemployment is at an all-time low in this country. We have seen that it works. Mr. Poilievre is mentioning his plan. They have not released a platform. No one knows what this plan is. It's a mystery. We
The fact
saw
is-
I told you
with
the
the
plan.
sheer
I just
Ford
told you the plan.
coalition-
I just
Where's
told
the
you the
platform?
plan. I
Where's
just
the
told you the
platform?
plan. We have a
Where's no
platform.
platform?
We do have a
Is it
platform.
released?
Okay.
We have a platform,
No,
and every
maybe-
item in our
maybe it's stuck
platform,
to a gas tank beside,
every
Doug
single
Ford
item,
stickers.
every single measure in our platform
Where's the platform
has
then?
been costed.
Where's the platform?
It's in the hands of the parliamentary budget officer,
We
who
have
has
not seen the
calculated
platform.
calculated
It's
every
this is
single.
a
Mr.
Doug
Rogers,
Ford
you have
platform.
asked me a question. I will answer
didn't
your
answer.
question. You can't
You
just
didn't answer
shout
the
people
question.
down
You
when
didn't
you're
answer the
afraid of
question.
the
Gentlemen,
answer. The reality is we have a costed platform. Unlike the Liberals, who have hidden their measures from the parliamentary budget officer,
Platform's released.
we live within our means, leave more in your pocket, and let you get ahead. We are the only party with a fully costed and verified platform that will achieve a balanced budget in 5 years and leave more in your
Let's let
pocket.
other
You know,
people
I
have a
actually
turn
have
here.
to first.
Kevin Hua, Kevin Hua, go
ahead. I mean, what's important is, Mr. Poliver said, well, we have to take money from you. That's not true. These two parties who have held government for 152 years have let the wealthy off the hook. Again, like I mentioned before, $51 billion have been taken out of your pockets in terms of investment into healthcare. With that $51 billion, we can fund universal pharmacare, we could fund universal childcare, and we'd have plenty extra to fund other programs. 1 in 10 Canadians cannot afford their prescription medications. That is completely unacceptable. And I mean, we have to have a government that's willing to fight for people, to be in it for them. And clearly these two parties aren't. They just know how to squabble between each other.
Exactly. Kevin's
Okay.
right on. And what we need is not just work. We need living wages so people can afford to work and live.
Okay,
$15
that's time.
minimum wage.
Let's go back to Alain Musende. I asked you the question. You get the final 30 seconds on this topic.
Yes, the challenges with affordability in this country is largely impacted by the high taxes and the deficit that our government is running, which are the taxes of tomorrow. So affordability cannot be solved with more debt. Do not believe any government that is not referring, or any party not referring to addressing that issue. Canadians should know that $5 billion a year of corporate welfare is given to big
Okay,
corporation
that's
taxes.
time. Thank you. We have time for one more question. In this case, though, I'm just going to ask the question, and you can each take a turn in answering it. You'll each have 1 minute to respond to this question. And the question is about light rail and transit. The first two phases of light rail, one of them has been built, the other construction is underway for it, based on each level of government chipping in 1/3 of the cost. It appears as though for phase 3 of light rail to happen, it will require the federal government and the provincial government each to put in 50%. There's no money coming from the municipal government. Would you be prepared to support the federal government putting 50% of the cost toward light rail? Chris Rogers?
Well, first of all, I'm thrilled that we're talking about phase 3 of the light rail already. This has already been a great success. One of the things that I've been talking about on the doors is getting the light rail to Stittsville. We know that that would improve the quality of life for commuters, for businesses to get their employees out to Stittsville to work in their place of business. This is exactly the type of project. This is exactly the type of vision that we need a member of parliament to have for our community. Getting the light rail and securing funding is something that I would personally champion as the member of parliament. We have committed as a government $3 billion more to municipalities specifically for transit and transit services, even beyond light rail. That is something that we are making permanent. And in terms of the exact numbers, I would certainly commit to doing the very best that we could as a federal government. And as I said, that is a personal commitment. That is what honest leadership would look like in Carleton.
Okay. Next, Pierre Poilievre. Go ahead.
Well, honest leadership is delivering, and that's what the previous Conservative government did specifically on Ottawa's transit project. It was Conservative Minister John Baird that secured the federal funding for Phase 1, which is now complete, and it was me that secured the funding for Phase 2, which is now soon to be underway. So our Conservative track record is to ensure that the City of Ottawa gets its share of infrastructure money. Ottawa, we will have a record amount of infrastructure dollars, and unlike the current government, our infrastructure dollars will actually go to infrastructure to get things built. And I will make sure, personally guarantee, that Ottawa gets its fair share of that, and that the City of Ottawa will have the ability to decide where that money goes. In my view is we need to champion transit to places like Stittsville, Riverside South, Findlay Creek, and at the same time improve and build upon the rural road infrastructure that has been
That's
sadly
time.
neglected.
Thank you. Next up is Kevin Hua, the NDP candidate.
I mean, it's no surprise that the two major parties didn't answer the question. The question is, would their governments pitch in 50% of the funding for the third stage of the LRT? An NDP government would do that, and we would go further because we want to champion to bring down, not only bring down the fare prices, but to eliminate them. Because if we've seen in Luxembourg and we've seen in France, when they've eliminated fare prices, ridership increases from about 50% to 100%. Personally, I've taken the 262 practically every day to commute to my university, and it gets really packed. There is a need, there's a high demand needed for people in Stittsville, Findlay Creek, Riverside South to get to their workplace or their place of education. So there needs to be massive infrastructure funding, and it needs to be implemented now. And frankly, I think many people in this riding can agree it's too slow. It needs to be moved forward more quickly, and there needs to be funding. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we'll go to Gordon Kubanek, the Green Party candidate. You have a minute as well.
Good news is we all seem to agree, and that's great to hear, that public transit is a wave of the future and we need to invest. Of course, we would support the investments, but we would go farther than that, that across Canada, every single city has the go-to method of public transit as the default method of transit, as they have in Europe, as they have in Asia. Remember, 80+% of Canadians now live in the big cities. Not only that, we would empower the cities to raise their own funds for the future so that they don't come begging all the time to the federal government. More than that, to make it actually work, we need to stop urban sprawl. Where we are, we have to stop and intensify, because public transit only works when we live in intensive cities. But more than that, I want to give you an example of our vision is to make high-speed rail the method of transportation between the cities in the Calgary-Edmonton corridor, and also Ottawa, Montreal, and Toronto, because it turns out that 80% of our carbon emissions from flying come from these short hauls. So electric rail, public transit will also save the environment.
That's time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alain Musende, you have 1 minute on this topic as well. Go ahead.
Yes, we will support providing the 50% funding for such a project, which is critical for the citizens of our city. But there are two key considerations that need to be taken into account. The first one is that the cities have a chronic problem of funding. So it shouldn't be based on generosity of which government it is in place or prime minister that is in place, who is in place. I have spoken with some of the city councillors, and they want a reliable source of funding. One thing that the People's Party of Canada can consider is, for example, transferring some GST point to the city so that they can do more. Second, if we're transferring this 50% of money, we should remember that we should avoid doing this type of initiative based on borrowed money, which are the debts of tomorrow. So we should really first clean up our fiscal situation to be in a position to live within our means.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Let's move to the closing statements now to wrap up our debate in the riding of Carleton. We will begin with Alain Musende, who is the People's Party of Canada candidate. Go ahead. You have 1 minute.
152 years of governance by the Liberals and the Conservatives had led to Canadian families, even with 2 paychecks, no longer able to afford life while paying high taxes. First Nations still not having access to potable water despite $5 billion a year being given to big corporations. The debt of the country, as I said earlier, $26 billion in interest being paid every year. No wonder that 40% of Canadians no longer vote. So I would urge you to have the courage and conviction to vote for the People's Party of Canada to change the course of our country. As the old saying goes, fool me once, shame on you. But fool me 152 times is way beyond shame on us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, with his closing statement, is Gordon Kubanek, the Green Party candidate. You have a minute as well.
The status quo is over. I hope that I've been able to show you that the Green Party is the collaborative and open option that you've been desperately seeking for. Sadly, the Liberals seem unable to stop creating programs that are well-meaning but waste your money, such as $150 million, a camping experience for every kid in Canada program. On the other hand, the Conservatives haven't found a tax credit for those well-to-do Canadians, and on top of that, their aggressive approach is now dividing Canadians instead of unifying them. 1 million striking youth have been telling us that we need to act on the climate front. There's a climate crisis. They are demanding action now. The Green Party, we will act. We won't pretend. This election, do yourself a favor, help your mental health, and don't vote strategically anymore. And on top of that, please talk to your kids, talk to your grandchildren, listen to them, see what they have to say, because your vote is a vote for their future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is the NDP candidate, Kevin Hua. Go ahead, you have 1 minute.
Yes, as a child, I was taught to be patient, to wait my turn, and to let the adults handle things. And I think I've waited long enough, 18 years, for change. And frankly, the continuous of conservative liberal swing has not brought any of the change that Canadians need. We have to fight on a cost of living front to cut your expenses when it comes to pharmacare, childcare, or housing. And we need to do it for climate change. For my generation, your children, our grandchildren, whose futures are on the line here, that we need to fight for. And it's also about changing how politics is. There needs to be an end to the hypocrisy, the deceit, and the lies that come out of it, which brings disillusionment and cynicism in politics. That's why I'm here to bring it forward, especially for the youth. And to, in terms of my age, to bring a quote from the founder of the New Democratic Party, Tommy Douglas, my friends, watch out for the little guy with the big idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is the Conservative candidate, Pierre Poilievre. You have 1 minute as well. Go ahead.
We've seen a lot of spending over the last 4 years, but unfortunately, it has gone to the privileged elite at your expense. If you're an executive at Loblaws, you might be thrilled that Justin Trudeau is buying you $12 million in new fridges. If you are a Bombardier executive, you might be thrilled that you got a $400 million non-repayable loan to lay off hundreds of workers. If you're SNC-Lavalin, you might be thrilled that this government is prepared to help you avoid criminal prosecution for fraud. Insiders and wealthy elites who are able to lobby for more are getting more under this government, but it's costing you more, and it's time for you to get ahead. That's why Conservatives will cancel $1.5 billion of corporate welfare, get rid of foreign aid to corrupt governments, and use the savings to lower income tax for working class people, reinstate tax credits for families, and lower taxes for our small businesses so that our entrepreneurs, our workers, you can get ahead.
Okay, thank you. Finally, the closing statement from the Liberal candidate, Chris Rogers. Go ahead.
Folks, today you've had a chance to listen to all the candidates, to hear their ideas, and there is a very clear choice in front of you. On one hand, there's a vision of governing with a very inward-looking foreign policy, a frightened view and reactive view of economic action, and a record of mean-spirited cuts towards the public service and the most vulnerable Canadians. On the other hand, there's a positive view of confidence and hopefulness for the future. That is the view that I have been working to build. That is the movement that I have been working to build in Carleton for the last 5 years. A viable, progressive alternative here in Carleton. We know that people in Carleton are tired of the same old, same old. They want honest leadership that works for them. And that's what I'm going to do. On October 21st, I humbly ask you to vote for Chris Rogers.
Thank you. Thank you to all the candidates for participating in our debate today. Best of luck to you throughout the rest of the campaign. I'll remind our viewers that the election is on October the 21st. You can vote then, or of course you can vote in advance polls that are happening on the Thanksgiving weekend as well. A reminder as well that Rogers TV and 1310 News will have live coverage of the local election results and the national story on October the 21st beginning at 9 p.m. I hope to see you then. Thank you for watching.